Today I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship for those who want to be the lao ban in the room. Interesting about my life is that in terms of entrepreneurship, my life began in serendipity. Now, I wasn't conceived in serendipity. I was born into serendipity. You see, it was 1975, February 26, my birthday. And a student doctor who was doing the rounds of the hospital noticed that there was some problem, an irregularity with my umbilical cord. It was wrapped around my neck. And he notified his superior, and his superior fixed the problem. And I was born a healthy baby, and all was well. Serendipity. But it could have gone horribly wrong, of course, and it didn't, because of that one doctor who noticed something different. Now, my mother used to tell me this story throughout my entire life, and in particular, one interesting fact about that student doctor. And I'll come to that a little bit later. Now, cut now to my teenage years, and I'm 18 years old and I'm at university. I'm enrolled in microbiology, 微生物. And as part of the university curriculum, to make you a more rounded person, they require you to go to a context curriculum. And on the day that I needed to enroll in subjects that were not related to microbiology, my alarm didn't go off due to a power outage. For the younger ones in the audience, this was before mobile phones and everything was connected to the mains. And so I was late. And I got to school and all the good subjects like sex, gender and society had all gone. And I only had one choice, and that was Chinese Mandarin. And I reluctantly took this course. Now, interestingly, 7 years later, I would open my own business here in Shanghai. And a few years later, I would get married to a Chinese, I would have a son in China, and I would write a book about China. So it's interesting. Serendipity could be your alarm clock. I was studying microbiology, and in the back of my mind, unconsciously, I was being taught this. I was taught about entrepreneurship from day one. Now, this is in French. Your English is fine. This is in French. And part of that learning of microbiology is we learned about this fellow, Louis Pasteur. Now, Louis Pasteur said, in the field of observation, chance favours only the prepared mind, which is what this is. And I heard that, and I read that, but it went into my unconscious mind, and it really didn't mean anything. Not much at all. But at the same time that I was doing microbiology, and at the same time I was learning Mandarin, I also became an entrepreneur. And that was because of the first rule of entrepreneurship and serendipity. And that is a simplified version: chance favours the prepared mind. And that's the first lesson for today, children. Now, where did I come across this? Where did it start to bloom? Where did I first see chance favours the prepared mind? Well, it was in the garden. It was a summer. I was 18 years old, and I was pushing around a lawnmower in front of a neighbour's garden, a job which I got paid $15 for, which was about $5 an hour. You know, you can always be a tutor of high school students, said my neighbour, who handed me a tall glass of water. You know, tutors earn a lot more than people who push lawnmowers around. And so I heard that, and as I said, chance favours the prepared mind. 3 months later, I opened my first business. I was 18 years old. And that first business became the seed of the business that I run in China. That first business was called Advantage Tuition. Now, interestingly, as I decided to study microbiology, learn Mandarin, become an entrepreneur, I also thought that I needed to prepare my mind further. I needed to learn more. So I joined the Army Reserves in Australia. It's non-compulsory. And I also decided to learn business. So I did an online business course as well, because I wanted to learn more. I didn't excel in any of those, but I did learn a lot. So chance favours the prepared mind is our first rule of today. Second rule of today is be a generalist, not a specialist. Be a generalist, not a specialist. This is vitally important. It's good to know a little bit about a lot if you're going to take advantage of serendipity. This is important. So I studied many things, and one of the things I needed to learn was about life experience. And so I found myself in this town, a town that many of you know as Yangshuo, near Guilin in Guangxi province, southern China. Now, I'd been there before. This wasn't my first trip. In 1998, 1999, over the New Year break, I was in this town. And it was during that trip, as I was backpacking with a friend, that I was walking down Xijie, West Street. And she walked out of one of the restaurants. We made eye contact. I looked at her, she looked at me. I said, hi. She said, hi. And then the moment was gone. Yeah, I never knew who she was. But 2 years later, I felt compelled to come back to this town. Something was pulling me back, and I don't know what it was. But 2 years later, after traveling all over the world, I came back to Yangshuo. And on that day, on one night, I met my wife. Now, she wasn't the same girl. Let's be aware of this. That would be totally romantic, wouldn't it? So this is only a little bit romantic. And I met this girl. Now, I'll add to the romance, however. She had been in this town, Yangshuo, for 7 days. And on the day that we met, she was meant to be on a train bound to Chengdu. She was heading back. But those first 6 days were raining. Every single day was raining. And the beautiful scene that you can see was obscured by that rain. But on the day that she met me, it was a perfectly blue sky. And so she went on a bicycle all the way from Yangshuo to Guilin. If you've ever done that before, it's about a 30-kilometer return trip. And she changed her ticket for one more day in Yangshuo. And that night, she met me. That's romantic. Yeah. So serendipity, yeah. Serendipity is subtle. It could be a wink, it could be a nod, it could be a hi. That's the problem with serendipity. You have to be alert. And sometimes you don't get a second chance. I did, but you might not. So that's the third rule of serendipity. Now, before she became my wife, she became my girlfriend. And then later, she became my investor. But before she became my investor, she had to become, well, I had to meet my business partner. I had to meet my first business partner. And it all started with many foreigners. It all starts with an English school, doesn't it? And so I found myself at a job here in Shanghai as an English teacher, a job which would allow me to have accommodation as part of the package. And I literally had put my bags down. I'd arrived only about an hour before, and there was a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. I opened the door. There was a man standing there, a Lao Wai. He looked at me. He said, hello, I'm Andy Clark. I said, Andy Clark. I said, hi, I'm Morry Morgan. I said, hi, Morry Morgan. Andy Clark, Morry Morgan, Clark Morgan. 3 months after that meeting, we started our first company. The company's called Clark Morgan. And we've gone on to grow many things. So literally, serendipity can knock on your door. And so since that time, my business has grown. We've won awards. We've grown to multiple offices. And we've gone on beyond the two dodgy blokes that we once were labelled. So that's an interesting part of serendipity. Now, it hasn't been easy. The business has grown. I've got more staff running the business. And we've survived both SARS and the global financial crisis. And SARS was easy because I was in my 20s. The company had very little overhead. We had very, very low costs. We had even lower salaries. There was no major issues. We didn't have children. We didn't have debt. But when the global financial crisis hit in 2008, 2009, things were different. I was married. I had a child on the way. We had over 80 full-time employees. And we had to fire 75% of our staff. Time was pretty tough. And it was a very down time in my life. But thankfully, due to serendipity, 6 months earlier, I'd met a man called Dr. Michael Hewitt-Gleeson. And I'd been randomly given his book. And I read his book, and it appealed to me. And I invited him to Shanghai. I invited him to Shanghai so that he could share his ideas on creative thinking, both Shanghai and Beijing, to people I knew and some of my customers. And so I was very lucky. I was both a student in his class, and I was also chaperoning him from location to location. So I got a lot of time one-on-one with him. And that was very valuable time, because had I not had that valuable time, I wouldn't have realized that there's always a better view of the situation. As an entrepreneur, there is always a better view of the situation. Now, we could have pulled our neck in, we could have crossed our fingers, and we could have hoped, please let me have a business in 2009 still. But we did the opposite. Instead of having the current view of the situation, which right now feels like entrapped, feels desperation, feels like there's no way out, we decided to have a better view of the situation, because we realized if you look at every struggle in your life, every trouble, every difficulty that you've ever gone through, and you look at it in hindsight, you notice that the solution wasn't that difficult after all. And if only you had had that better view of the situation earlier, you would have got out of your melancholy faster. And that's what Michael Hewitt-Gleeson taught me. So for the entrepreneurs in this room, as you have those down days, maybe you'll have to fire 75% of your staff. Realize that no matter how bad you feel, no matter how times feel tough, that there's always a better view of the situation. So what do I mean? Well, instead of hunkering down and doing nothing and saving our pennies, we decided to put on an ideas conference. We did it at the Shanghai World Financial Center, the SWFC, here in Shanghai. Now, at the time, it was the tallest building in Shanghai, and it had just been finished. And it was called the Shanghai World Financial Center during the global financial crisis. It was the worst timing of any building ever. So I got a discount. And I got a lot of things because I saw the better view of the situation. And we took 19 speakers from big companies like Microsoft, Worldwide Fund for Nature, IDEO, Arup, companies that probably had more time on their hands because of the global financial crisis. And I got them to speak about 4 different areas. Those 4 different areas were humanities, environment, business, and science. And over 300 people attended. And instead of being invisible during the global financial crisis, my company was very, very visible. And we won market share. And we grew from there. And so, in fact, if the global financial crisis hadn't happened, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today. My company wouldn't be as strong as it is today. Thankfully, I saw the BVS. Which brings me to my last point. By bringing those people together from different areas, as I said, humanities, environment, business, and science, by bringing those different minds together, I was able to create something that is an oxymoron, that cannot be. And that is simply planned serendipity. We planned serendipity because we knew that by bringing difference together, we create options. We create the possibilities. And that's very important. As an entrepreneur, as a person in life, you need to seek unlike-minded people. And that can be very, very difficult in life. It can be very difficult in life because, we're all told, stranger danger. Strangers are dangerous. And more importantly, that in China, where we are here today, in that the 5 levels of Confucius, the 5 relationships, it doesn't include stranger to stranger. And so, while we fear those around us who have different languages, different opinions, different views, different beliefs, it's an actual fact the opposite that what we should be doing. If we want to be a great entrepreneur and take advantage of serendipity, then we need to think differently. Which brings me back to 1975. It was February 26, my birthday. And that student doctor noticed something different, something that no one else in that Australian medical team had noticed. An umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. It was going to kill me, but he noticed it and he raised the alarm bells and I was saved. And my mother used to tell me that story, and as I grew up, it all made sense because there was one interesting fact about that doctor. He was from China. So ladies and gentlemen, I've been part of China's serendipity, and China has been part of my serendipity, literally, since my birth. Thank you.